Hey everyone, welcome to the Advanced Sports Analytics live stream. I'm joined today by Charles. Charles has been working on our NBA projections and optimizer app this week, so I think he's a good guest to have on ahead of tonight's big four-game slate. I don't know if we've had a four-game playoff slate in a while, but yeah, it should be. I mean, it's going to play almost like a kind of full, complete slate, and then of course, SuperDraft has been highlighting the champion mode contest. I believe they're featured contests for tonight or for the Atlanta New York game, which I know our projections have worked quite well for that matchup in the past. I think the last time they had a featured Atlanta New York game, our optimal lineup, which SuperDraft has been tweeting out each night, actually took down or tied maybe for first place in their featured tournament. So feeling good about our projections ahead of that game. Not a little bit has changed as far as some of the players that are kind of getting the most run. There's been a little bit of a flippening at starting center for New York, but for the most part, I think should play pretty similar to how it's been kind of for the last couple games in the series. So yeah, why don't we start, Charles, with the main four-game slate? We can use our projection system to kind of talk through the slate, some players that we're looking at. So when we start for the main slate, starting at the guard position, who are some of the top players that are kind of bubbling to the top of our projections at the guard position?
Let's see. So we're seeing a lot of solid guys here. Point guard Luka, obviously, who's been incredible, and at the top, Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, Ja Morant. So Russell Westbrook, obviously, coming off that monster game, and Embiid went out, and they've really performed incredibly. I think Russell Westbrook with that one multiplier is a difficult spot because he's never really going to hurt you and take you out of tournaments, but it's really hard for him to win you them. So I mean, like him there, but next is a guy, Derrick Rose, who's seemingly been a little mispriced for the role he's been taking. Just absolutely stepped up to New York in the lower total game of the night, but a guy who's seen 20 shots throughout the first four games. And, aside from a little knee injury that took him out for 4 or 5 minutes, kept him short of his normal slate. I mean, a definite slate winner tonight if he has a 20 shot game, 30 points, 10 assists, like he's been showing he's capable of.
Yeah, so Westbrook, I mean, I don't know, he's just been completely filling up the stat sheet, and I think one thing to look at with him, like SuperDraft isn't going to price him below 1x, and it kind of feels like that is what is needed for him to fall in line, I think, with the rest of the field. Either that or they just need to boost everyone's multiplier by zero point 0.05 or zero point 0.1x, because just the role that he has, the productivity that he has as offensively, scoring the basketball, but also rebounding, distributing. And I think he's a good defender too. Like he racks up steals, is not a complete zero in terms of block shots, even though he's a point guard. And like you look at the game he had the other night, massive triple double, and he didn't even shoot well from the field. I mean, like he has
Awful.
yet he has yet he has yet to piece together like a complete game in terms of being an efficient scorer and doing all the other things. So like, not even sure that we've seen Russ's ceiling, even though he had an incredible game the other night. Also feel like Russ is just a gamer. I mean, he's going to show up in an elimination game. They're playing him 40 plus minutes consistently, so seems like a pretty safe spot. High floor, high-ish ceiling. Like I think in a 2 or 3 game slate, Russ would be unfadable. But when you are dealing with a 4 game slate, there are just kind of more high multiplier options that could potentially beat him out. But I think with the playoffs where teams are kind of shortening their bench, keeping the rotations tighter. I think there are just fewer higher multiplier guys in play. So, with that in mind, I do think it's going to be tough for Russ to not be a part of certainly optimal cash game lineups, and I think will be a heavy favorite in tournament lineups as well. Interesting slate where Bradley Beal has been quite good. He's kind of getting fully back to full form, and we have him projected as what I'm seeing as like the third highest guard. For cash game purposes, like I wouldn't be concerned about playing Westbrook and Beal in the same lineup. But that being said, they're both at low multipliers. Russ at the 1x floor, Beal at the 1.1, which is maybe the third lowest multiplier on the slate, fourth lowest behind, third lowest since Embiid's out. And the 4-game slate, so I think there are just a larger pool of players to choose from. Do you or would you have any qualms about rostering Westbrook and Beal in the same tournament lineups, or are you okay with taking both of these Washington studs in the same lineup and kind of hoping that the other games go under, or the other games a lot of the scoring comes through non-guards?
Yeah, I mean, no problem at all playing both of them. I mean, Russ had 20 rebounds last game and was 3 for 19 from the field and still, was a lineup winner. Bradley Beal consistently over 20 field goal attempts. If anything, you have to be worried about the other slates with, Utah. Like if you're looking at Mitchell, they're 10-point favorites. There's plenty of game paths there where he's out in the fourth quarter. I mean, this is a game where Philly's still 7-point favorites. This just sets up for Russ and Beal to just be working for 40 minutes and just filling up the box score. Yeah, I mean, I love them both tonight. It's one of the highest scoring matchups over-under-wise. I mean, they just set up to be great plays.
Yeah, certainly. And Washington, is the kind of most up-tempo team in the playoffs right now. So any game that they are a part of is naturally going to have a pretty high total. So, if it was, I don't know, say you were taking two like low multiplier plays and say New York versus Atlanta, which kind of has a low total, maybe there might be concerns if there was maybe a 4-game slate where kind of benches were being utilized in a pretty deep manner, then maybe taking two low multiplier players from the same team could be difficult. But yeah, given the context of the slate, I do think I'm with you in that there's room for both of these Washington studs to be a part of the winning lineup. Let's see. So moving along to forward, I think we have kind of the big injury on the slate, which I think it's pretty much assumed that Joel Embiid will not play tonight. So expecting forward eligible players like Harris and Simmons to take on a little bit more of a offensive role. Embiid has kind of been the focal point for the Philadelphia offense, and with him out, expecting guys like Harris and Simmons down lower in our projection to have big games. Is there any, or are there forwards you're kind of considering in close competition to Harris? Are there other forwards that are kind of off the top of our projection list that maybe stand out as viable plays for cash or tournament?
Bogan maybe, but I mean, I don't. It's hard to look past how good Tobias looks in this spot. I mean, we're looking at a guy in game one who put up almost 30 field goal attempts with Embiid in the lineup. Has regressed a little bit back to his season total, but I mean, Vegas still has them favored by 7. It just seems like a game where he's getting 25 plus and can fill up the stat sheet, and he's still got that 1.25 multiplier. I mean, I just absolutely love the spot here for him. Obviously, Embiid out changes the complete dynamic of that game. Julius Randle at the 1.2. I mean, we've seen him all series. He's kind of our next projected value guy, but he's been cold, came on a little bit in game 4. I mean, it's definitely a risk to get him involved if he has one of those games like the most improved player, quality of the game, he could make a difference. But Harris has got the slight lean and multiplier with all of that working for him.
Yeah, and another guy I think that's standing out in our projections is Leonard. I mean, he's been really great for Los Angeles. And I think when you look at him versus Randall, there's kind of a how much do you expect these players to regress to their mean? Like Randall has been very cold scoring the ball, as you mentioned. Do we think there is some component of this matchup that is just tough for Randall, and do we expect him to kind of continue at an efficiency clip that he has been on to start the series, or do we expect kind of a regress to the mean, or regression to the mean in terms of his offensive scoring efficiency? And then Leonard has been highly efficient, like shooting 60+% from the field, making half of his threes. He's been awesome. Do we think that there is a latent, efficiency boost for him in this series going up against Dallas, or do we expect him to kind of regress to his mean at a certain point? Our projections lean, and I think kind of just by the eyeball test, I would lean towards Leonard simply because he is so versatile and how he can be, a fantasy contributor. Like, obviously, if he's shooting lights out, that's going to be great for him. But even if he has a cold night, he does enough defensively. He does enough rebounding the ball and distributing to still see his way to, not a total bust. Even if he's cold from the field, we've seen Randall put up some, difficult fantasy totals to really stomach for tournament purposes when he goes cold from the field, because he doesn't typically do quite as much on the defensive end as Leonard. And, as we know, those defensive stats are really upweighted on SuperDraft, worth 3 fantasy points for a block or steal compared to, say, 2 on like DraftKings. So I do think like Leonard and Paul George to a lesser extent have these nice floors baked into their fantasy profile because, how good they are defensively. But I think all 3 of those guys make for strong plays. Doncic, as we mentioned, kind of in the guard section, but he's also forward eligible. Looks like in our optimals, we're seeing more of Doncic in the guard slot. So it looks like, just looking at our exposures, our projections are pretty certain around forward, a real heavy exposure, full exposure. If we were running just like 20 optimals with no bounce or anything, 100% exposure to Harris, 95% exposure to Leonard, 80% exposure to George. We have 25% exposure to Randall. So pretty much the 4 forwards in consideration are, Harris, Leonard, George, and Randall. And then Doncic looks like he's getting pushed to the guard position. So seems like kind of tighter player pool at the forward position. You could make considerations for like some of these high multiplier forwards like Gafford or Howard. Gafford's been a champion mode kind of stalwart. He's had really high multipliers in champion mode. We're not really that high on like Simmons, even though Embiid is out, kind of expecting most of that usage to be redistributed to Harris. I think that kind of makes sense. Taj Gibson got a good multiplier, but just not he's really only good for rebounds and blocks and a few points. I think he's more viable for single game purposes, which we'll get to in a sec. But just not playing or not projectable for enough minutes to really be in consideration at the forward position. So moving along to center. Obviously, we have Randall, but it seems like he is more popular, or at least gains more traction in our optimals via the forward position. So if we exclude him and kind of looking just at pure centers, seems to be a pretty narrow discussion between Gobert, who we have a strong projection on, and then there's kind of some dispersion in this second tier of centers between Valanciunas, Capella, Lopez. We mentioned Gafford and Howard, who might be viable at center more so than forward, given the high projections on some of these top forwards. Are there any guys? Like is it reasonable to just lock in Gobert if you're only running 5 or so lineups, and if not, are there any centers that you kind of have your eye on as maybe alternatives to Gobert?
Yeah, there's the one guy I whose stats I was shocked at is like a Robin Lopez 1.95. He was 8 of 11 last game, and absolutely ate up the stat sheet. And if he gets those Bertans minutes that he's out, those 23 minutes, if he's in 26, 27, 20, upwards of that, he could have a real good game. But it's just, it's hard to see a guy like, even with a 1.95, it just doesn't feel like enough to the Gobert 1.25. Gobert's just been an absolute monster, with what blocks are worth. If he has one of those games, it's hard to miss him there.
Yeah, it's like the scoring characteristics that SuperDraft rewards for centers specifically, double doubles. So rebounds play up a good bit, defensive stats, particularly blocks for centers. And if you can have a center like Porzingis maybe, who's a 3-point shooter, like those things play up. And Lopez isn't like great at any of those things, right? Like I would say he's not a particularly strong rebounder for his position, or like a particularly strong defender. And unlike his brother, who I think is viable kind of as a 3-point shooter, like Lopez doesn't really do that. So you're kind of just, I think, counting, I think he's worth like very fringe consideration. You're kind of just counting on him like playing more minutes than expected, taking more shots than expected, and also capitalizing efficiently on those shot attempts. I'm trying to think what game script would figure to benefit Lopez. I guess like a tight game. Well, I don't know. Gafford's been playing so well, and we're expecting actually Gafford to start for Washington. Like, maybe Gafford getting in like foul trouble or something. These are game scripts that are somewhat difficult to predict. I don't know. Maybe just Philadelphia blowing the doors off them, I guess, and Washington going to the bench players to kind of end the season.
Yeah, Gafford there with that 26 minutes last game, 5 blocks. 1.75 multiplier. You figure whoever gets that Bertans minute bump, could be viable, but even from there, as you're alluding to, it's difficult.
Yeah. So Gafford is an interesting one. Given how productive he is defensively, and he's got that high multiplier, like maybe he could outshoot, not outshoot, but outscore Gobert. Let's see, we have a delta of, nearly 10 points. Looks like 9 fantasy points between Gafford and Gobert. But you do, one thing to like about Gafford with the 1.75 multiplier is, just kind of turning his variance up a little bit. So, if he does have another kind of overproductive game on the defensive end, that high multiplier allows kind of for high variance outcomes, which, maybe could work in his favor. It's just tough. Gobert has been looking like a lock to just double each night and get, 3+ blocks. I'm not sure I really see anything that would, cause us reason to expect that to change. Gobert feels quite solid. All right, so if we want to look at the Atlanta-New York game, if you're using our optimizer, just typing in the specific teams and deleting out the other ones, and then setting the format to showdown, as it's referred to on DraftKings. This is synonymous with the champion mode or single game mode on SuperDraft. The all projections tab will show you the projections for players based on their utility multiplier. The projected SuperDraft points is the raw, value is the post, utility multiplier, projection. If you want to understand like what the champion projection looks like for that player, it would just be the value times 1.5. So who are the guys that are standing out for the Atlanta-New York game based on their single game multipliers?
I mean, as we alluded to, Bogan is just until he's properly priced. It's just, I mean, the way he plays the captain role is just too easy there. And then it's kind of like building around him. Who do we like? I'm a big proponent of Derrick Rose getting in a lot of lineups. As we alluded to, he's kind of like the only bright spot in the next playoff run this season. So looking for a lot of production out of him. And then, you know, you can start to build in a little variance around some other guys. We're liking RJ Barrett a little bit of Julius Randle. And then, I mean, Taj Gibson, as we alluded to, he's included in some lineups. You know, he was really came on game 4, only got like 24 minutes, but you know, still eats up the stat sheet. He's one of those guys. If he has a big game, he's probably underplayed in other lineups. So yeah, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, Bogdan, it's just like if you just look at kind of the highest multiplier players, like Bogdan just has such an insane role compared to the other guys at his price point. And like, there's really not anyone even close. You know, it's just like a incredibly appealing multiplier for a guy who, you know, we have projected for 36 minutes, 22% usage rate, which is good. I mean, that's probably, you know, the second highest usage rate, I would guess. Yeah. On Atlanta, aside from, you know, Lou Will, who will be high usage, but, you know, will play very few minutes. And, you know, his game is just like well tailored to the SuperDraft scoring. He's, you know, 3-point specialist, taking a bunch of threes and shooting them at a pretty high efficiency this game, or this series rather. You know, he gets rebounds. He's not a total zero on the defensive end. He can get assists. Like, I mean, he's been their second scoring option really all series, and, you know, has the multiplier of kind of a fringe bench player. So, I mean, I think you got to lock Bogdan in all lineups. And, you know, if you're playing like only 3 or 4 lineups, you know, don't be afraid to go Bogdan in champion in all lineups. He's been getting pretty high ownership at the champion slot. So to be overweight on him, you know, you're going to have to be pretty aggressive in terms of your utilization of him. And Rose, you touched on as well. He's kind of appearing as the, you know, he and Bogdan are the only players when you run 20 optimals are appearing in all of those optimals. We lean towards Bogdan as the champion and Rose as a utility player. But as you get kind of lower down the projection hierarchy, we are seeing some Rose champion lineup. So I think that makes good sense. He's been playing, you know, way more minutes, I think, than he has during the regular season. Kind of similar usage rate, but just via more minutes, taking more shots. His assist rate is up. So, you know, I will be interested to see. You know, I guess during the regular season, he's probably playing a lot of minutes alongside Quickly and Alec Burks, who are, you know, somewhat ball dominant guards as part of the starting, you know, lineup where he's playing alongside. I guess Randall is really probably the ball handler that he would compete with for, you know, just possession and kind of assist opportunity. So his assist rate's been up. I don't know. I think I probably would expect that to continue for the remainder of the series, just given the rotation he's playing with. You think that makes sense, or are you expecting like a regression as far as his, you know, assist frequency goes?
No, I'm with you, and you know, I still think there's even upside. I mean, there's a clear change. You know, they got Alfred Payton out of the lineup, getting 0 minutes. They finally, you know, showed D Rose the respect he deserved and put him in the starting lineup. I mean, he brings the ball up the court every time, and you know, I mean, the lack of conversion from the Knicks offense is probably keeping that assist rate from being even higher, to be honest.
Yeah,
So
it's a good point.
I really like what I'm seeing there. And I mean, it feels like for the Knicks to have a chance tonight, he needs to have like a vintage D Rose type of night, which obviously will bode well on the championship slate.
Yeah. Let's see. Other guys, you touched on Gibson, just a high multiplier, and should be playing pretty good minutes as the starting center. Kind of just counting on him getting a lot of rebounds, which I think is a fine bet to make. Barrett, he's been kind of quiet for the series, and I think Thibodeau has been at times like eager to place him on the bench if he's not being productive. So I don't know. Seems that his role is kind of highly volatile just based on how he's playing on any given night. Um, might see kind of suppressed ownership for him on that account. Burks, not going to play a ton of minutes, but when he's on the floor, and especially since he's no longer playing, or he's playing probably fewer minutes alongside Rose, I think might command a little more usage than usual. So at 2.05, I think he makes for a fine play. It's an interesting slate. I mean, like last night with Portland, Denver, Lillard and Jokic projected so well that you kind of had to have at least one of those guys in all lineups. And our projections were suggesting that both of those guys in the lineups. And I think naturally ownership kind of gravitates maybe overexposed to some of these high multiplier players. Last night was a tough slate to get off of the studs and kind of build through productive role players, but especially on the New York side, it feels like a slate where we can kind of build through guys like Barrett, Gibson. Rose is kind of one of the studs on New York right now, but is kind of priced as a role player. Even looking deep at like someone like Obi Toppin or something, it does feel like more of a slate where you could get away with a lineup that doesn't have either of Randall or Young, who are kind of the clear studs on the slate, or doesn't have any of Randall, Young, or Capella. You could just build through. I mean, like our top 5 guys, our optimal lineup has none of those guys, right? Bogdan, Barrett, Rose, Burks, Taj Gibson. Two? I guess Burks is the only non-starter, but Taj is kind of a fringe starter. Doesn't have the best player from either team in the optimal. So I do think it's one of these slates where there can be kind of a big advantage to using projections that are kind of skewed more towards the high multiplier plays as that they stand to go under-owned. When we saw that was the case, I think last time they had featured New York, Atlanta, Taj Gibson was like super low ownership and had a great game. That game, I think Noel was starting, but Gibson kind of usurped him over the course of the game, and I think has been starting ever since. So something to keep an eye on. Well, yeah, I got nothing else. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, I mean, just to harp on that, Taj Gibson, I was looking into it. The best plus minus probably for a Nick. I mean, he just seems like the guy that when he's out there, the Knicks are playing better. And as you said, I mean, Trae Young 1.05, Julius Randle 1 multiplier. I mean, it's hard to see such a big discrepancy between D Rose at like a 1.8. I mean, these guys, Young and Randle, have to have even if Trae Young puts up a 40-point game, he's not active on the boards, not on defense. I mean, it's hard to see paths where they're going to be the highest scorer on the board.
Yeah, definitely. All right, great. Well, thanks so much for joining today, guys. Thanks for joining and talking through the slate with us, Charles. We'll be back later this week to do another NBA live stream. So check back. You can follow our Twitter stream, our Twitter account, or the SuperDraft account to get more information on when those will occur. Good luck to everyone tonight in both the main slate and the champion slate, and we will be back later this week.